Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, great. All right, so we're going to start the presentation. Mr. Holzer.
Okay, so the key topics that we'll be discussing this evening are the process of setting our tax rate, inclusive of the Hancock law, the sources of funding for MRH, the 24 assessed values and tax rates, and the proposed and historical tax rates, followed by the projected property tax revenue from the rates that we set this year. So I don't want to read all these to you, but in St. Louis County, and only in St. Louis County, our tax rates must be submitted to the county collector before October 1st, or by October 1st. When we do that, the county collector certifies those rates, but prior to that, they are submitted to the state auditor's office, who also then signs off on them and makes sure that all of the numbers that we're using are accurate. And then let's talk about the Hancock Amendment just a little bit. So the Hancock Amendment limits the amount of increase we can have year over year to the lesser of assessed valuation, the consumer price index, or 5%. So in our case this year, it being a non-reassessment year, the only additional revenue that we can receive will be related to new construction and improvements. The residential rate of growth due to those factors is 0.1059%, and commercial is 1.7965. The CPI was 3.4%, and 5% being the maximum that we can go to. So we can only increase to the lesser of these values. So how do we calculate that tax rate? We take that permitted revenue, we divide it by the current assessed value, and that becomes the tax rate. And the timeline thereof, September, we finalize those calculations and have our tax rate hearing. In October, we have those rates certified both by the state auditor's office and the county collector. And then in November, the bills will be mailed by the county. We did just hear yesterday that the county did pass a revenue increase so that they can actually mail the tax bills this year. Prior to yesterday, it looked like perhaps those bills would not be mailed out and they would just expect folks to pay their tax bill. So that's a really important thing for us because that would have dramatically increased our delinquent rate, which would have decreased our current taxes that we would have received this year, which would have been a pretty big hit to our revenue. We would have eventually gotten it, but it wouldn't have been in the year. So this year's tax rate includes recoupment. Recoupment is actually part of the Hancock Amendment. The Hancock Amendment was designed to protect the taxpayer from any of those dramatic increases in assessed valuation so that the taxing authorities didn't receive a windfall at the expense of the commercial and residential property owners. But it's also there to protect the taxing entities in that we are allowed to go back and recoup lost revenue from prior years as it relates to state tax commission cases that are closed and settled. So if a company or a resident protests their taxes, some time goes by, sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's up to 2-3 years beyond where the protest occurred, but we can go back in time and recalculate that loss and push that forward. So this year we recalculated assessed valuation 2020, 2021, and 2023. So it's a lot of fun to go back and do all those calculations that we've already done before. That's the way that works. And then we submit all of those through to the state auditor, and we go back and forth until we finally agree on the numbers, and then we calculate the amount of lost revenue. So this year we'll be recouping $113,540 thereabouts. Now that is the number at 100% collection rate, so this number is a projected number, not an actual number. $113,500 isn't a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but in the district's current financial position with our fund balance the way it is, it helps. So the majority of our revenue does come from our local sources. The majority of the local sources are from our local taxpayers. And you can see from the other categories there, state is next, followed by federal, other, and then county. Here's how the assessed valuation lines up. So this year, $294 million increase to the residential side, a little over a 2% increase on the commercial side, for a total of a 1.06 increase across all categories. Personal property tax, personal property increased about 0.9. Actually, I'm sorry. Personal property tax was negative 0.16%, and the entire total was 0.9% across all property types. Here's what the rates turned out this year are. And it's important that we determine the difference between the operating levy and the debt service levy. So debt service is only for bonded indebtedness. That's the only thing that we can use that money for. And that is a separate levy from the operating levy. The operating levy takes care of everything else. In St. Louis County, we are a multi-rate county. The rest of the counties, to my knowledge, are single rate. So St. Louis County, I guess, likes to do it a little bit more difficult than everybody else. So our operating levy with recoupment included is 3.5173. Commercial will be 3.9767. Personal property tax remains unchanged at 5.4658. Debt service levy will be applied to each of those property classes at $1.35. The blended rate is only used to allocate those taxes to the appropriate funds, and that's a DESI thing. So if we were a single rate county, that blended rate would be the one that would go out in the tax bills, but we are not, so it will be the residential, commercial, and personal property rates that folks are sent to pay. Looking at how this changed over time, the first schedule there is the 2023 rates, and the lower schedule is for the 2024 rates, and you can see the variance down below. The residential rate increases a little over 6 cents, the commercial rate decreases about 2 cents, and the blended rate is about 3.5 cents or so higher than it was in the prior year. These are our historical rates going all the way back to 2016. It's important that our community understands how these tax bills are calculated. So let's just say, for instance, a residential property is market value is $250,000. That property is assessed at 19%, and which would make the assessed value $47,500. We apply the tax rate of 4.8673, and the property tax due then would be $2,311.97. And the same goes for commercial. Of course, we use a bigger number for the commercial properties, that's $1 million. So at the 5.3267 rate, that would net $17,045.44. Personal property, $21,000 would be the market value. That is assessed at 33.3%, 33 1/3. Assessed value right around 7,000. Tax rate of 6.8158 for a personal property tax bill of $476.63. We do have some tips. Maplewood has Deer Creek, which is still open, Cambridge Commons, which is now closed, and the Hanley Road south of Folk. Richmond Heights, we have Hadley Township, areas B and C, which was completed, and we have Hadley Township sub-area A, scheduled to expire in 2036, and Hadley Township South in 29. And I present these because the assessed value on these properties is not included in the assessed valuations until that tip closes. Once that tip closes, the increase goes into new construction, and then it just becomes part of the regular assessed valuation year over year from that point forward. Here's the projected tax revenue for operations. Remember we talked about the difference between operations and debt service. A little over 17 million, 17.1 million on the operations side, just under 6 million on the debt service side, and for a total of 23.179 million. And I do have this scaled to our historical collection rates. On real property, it's 98.35%, and on personal property, it's 93.8%. I base that on a 3-year average collection rate so that we get a pretty good ballpark. And budget, we were budgeting about 16.6 million on the operations side and 5.8 million on the debt service side. And you can see the increases that nets just under $675,000 across both of those. That is the end of the presentation, and I would welcome any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, do you know how much the Hanley Road South TIF would help?
Not off the top of my head. I don't think that's off the top of my head.
I was curious, so I know last year, with our assessment, we had, we brought in a lot more for our debt service than we needed, and so since we kept that rate the same, that'll happen again.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, do we consider, I guess, what was your plan with those extra funds? Were we gonna pay down bonds early again?
Yeah, that's absolutely something that we can do, is do what we call a defeasance. It's essentially you're paying off the back of the principal on the amortization table and pay those off quicker, which would free up additional room if we needed to borrow more money for projects in the future.
What is our bonding capacity based off this assessment? Would it be about, is it about 60?
Again, I don't have that number right in front of me, but it is 15% of our assessed value minus debt.
Minus debt?
Yeah, it's inclusive of the debt, so.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to subtract the debt number off the top of that 15%.
Jenny at the community roundtable, our Stiefel advisor, said it was 9.6% is where we are currently.
We're at 9.6%.
And that translates into, it's north of 15 million is our capacity.
Is what we have currently.
Is what we could borrow if we needed to, yes.
And I guess my question is, we've talked about how it's possible we need to go out. I guess my first question is, I guess for the prior board, what were your thoughts when you decided to keep that rate the same and pay down more debt? Was it with the idea of going out to the public for a bond? Like instead of lowering the rate and giving it back to the people, I guess is my question.
I'm not sure it works that way.
I mean, I wouldn't speak for everyone, but I could say that I think there's a couple of things at play here that, yes, we are aware of. Last year's board was aware of a number of deferred maintenance, the ongoing calls for a new track, a variety of physical plant issues, and so wanting to be able to have some wiggle room with an ask to the community for bonding capacity that would not raise taxes. I think there's, I would say that was kind of my main consideration in maintaining the tax rate at the rate that it had been for 10 years. So, yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is, people took a really big hit last year, and I'm just posing it. I'm not saying one way or the other, but we had a fair amount of room there. I mean, I would hope what we would plan to borrow we wouldn't need 15 million. I mean, I think from the presentation it was like about 5, 6. I mean, I don't know. I guess is it a thought to perhaps give people a break on this year if we're going to have to go to them for an increase for an operating levy in the future? I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I would have to see the numbers about, how much individual, household relief, is provided there. I mean, obviously, every $100 is real money to folks, and I don't know how many couple of $100 on an individual household that would have been, but it is obviously a pretty large amount in the aggregate for the district, which requires a large amount of money. So, yeah, it was not information that we requested last year.
And I mean, I think that practically speaking, the problem is that the deadline is quickly approaching, and we don't really have any time to do those calculations. And even if we did, I mean, I don't think that, like, I mean, yeah, I mean, not to sound callous about it, but I just don't think that the benefit to individuals really outweighs the benefit to the school for keeping things as proposed.
Do we have an idea of what, I know we were waiting for a facilities plan. Do we know how much we sort of are needing in capital improvements?
So Dr. Dietrich is currently still working on the numbers, and those numbers have actually changed since we initially presented at the board community roundtable. I will also offer that the State Department recently published an article that they are, I believe, $100 million short of their budget. And when I was talking to Hoser today, we chuckled that the first place that they typically take that money is from transportation, and they will probably cut additional areas as well. And so we continue to have conversation with STIFO around our bonding capacity and also looking at what other revenues, but even the conversation around the cost to replace the kitchen was a lot more. I couldn't believe that it was as costly as it is. And also, from the feedback from the board community roundtable, I know that Ed sent out an additional survey to try to get more feedback back to see what the appetite would be for the community so that we can bring to the board a plan around whether we are looking at a bond, a tax levy, or one of the two, or both together. I think is a huge piece of that. But I'll talk a little bit about that tonight when we discuss my goals and just the idea around that may get to what you're asking for without really having an impact on community.
Yeah, I mean, and I just think it's a worthwhile conversation to at least have as a group, because I mean, I know we got this because we just sort of found out the hit to us, so, and it was a lot. So I just want to make sure we're balancing sort of what we actually need from community and what we could sort of give back, since this fund is limited to only debt service, I guess.
Correct.
I don't know if anyone else had thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that is certainly on my mind right now is, again, some of the unknowns with things like the senior property tax freeze in St. Louis County and how that has a potential to impact us that we really can't currently plan for. I think, last year's legislative efforts to tamper with the personal property tax rates and revenues, was also something that was fairly impossible to calculate the impact. And now with this information from, last week's state Board of Education meeting around, giant shortfalls, we are the only ones who are going to take care of us. And so I think that's something we are very fortunate to have a community that has supported us, and I think needs to know that there are those kind of unknown threats out there too to our ability to bring in revenue.
Any other questions?
Sorry. Does anyone else have one before I ask my one?
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
Go on.
I was curious about, I was curious why our debt service this year is higher than last year, because usually it's descending. So whatever was on the form last year was less than what our projected.
As far as projected revenues?
No, our debt service. Like what our payment, what we need to pay.
Do you mean Form C line 2?
Yeah.
Form C line 2.
So Form C is the result of the calculation. So it's the amount of debt, the debt service requirement for the current calendar year, and then the next calendar year plus a reasonable reserve.
Right.
So we're able to scale those numbers as the district sees appropriate to it, with the limit, of course.
because what the $1.35, the revenue is 5,997, but the amount on that form is 4,766, but last year it was less than that. So I guess it just didn't make sense to me logically that, because usually your payment goes down and you paid off more, so I would have thought last year's amount would have been less, or more than this year, you know what I mean?
It doesn't quite work that way.
Okay.
We have a debt schedule that tells us how much we have to pay each year.
Right,
So
okay.
it doesn't, our payments don't decrease over time. They actually remain pretty constant over time.
I mean, the schedules in the budget show decreasing payments because your interest goes down, so you're,
Slightly, but they
Right.
maintain relatively the same rate. Like it's about 4.7 million this year, it's a little right around that the following year. And it also things have been recalculated because we did defease $2 million off of 2015,
Right.
so things have changed a little bit there as well.
okay. So that's typical, it can go back and forth? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I move to approve the,
I'm sorry, it's a lot.
they have citizen comments.
Oh, yeah, we can do that.
Okay, all right. Anybody sign up for citizen comment? No? Did anybody sign up for citizen comment? Keep telling me to be quiet. Thank you. All right, you have citizen comments, so, can I get a motion to approve the tax rate as presented?
Motion to approve the tax rates is presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Move to adjourn?